Welcome to Overnight Experts, the podcast where we talk about something we became an expert on overnight. I'm JJ, and joining me are
Aiden
and David.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are at war. And this intro is probably going to be terrible if this is released and something changes in world politics before this comes out. But I'm doing it. We are at a war against Christmas.
Are we winning?
I don't know. I don't know if there's any winners. I don't know. What side are you on? Do you support Christmas or do you support the secular agenda? Okay, I'm getting a little too strong. I don't know. I think everyone's heard the people mention a war on Christmas kind of mentality before. This has been a thing for a while, but have you ever met somebody in real life who kind of says something like that?
I mean, I've never met somebody who called it the war on Christmas, but I will say my dad, not to call him out here, but he's the kind of person who will go up to somebody during this, this current season and say Merry Christmas, very pointedly and slightly aggressively, just to say, yes, I'm a believer in Christmas, as opposed to Happy Holidays.
That's the kind of thing. It's I see the same thing. It's I don't see people going out there and be like, there's a war against Christmas and we got to protect it. It's usually something kind of just an implication. It's this is a little weird. But the war on Christmas term typically refers to kind of a narrative that culture as a whole is trying to delegitimize Christmas as either part of culture or from being a Christian specific thing or anything like that. And just this overall narrative that the world is trying to forcibly become more secular and get rid of Christmas. And it's a thing that I see peddle a lot, but I don't think a lot of people really believe it. There are some people who absolutely fall into it, but it's just weird, man. It's just weird. It's a conflict of it's technically a culture war kind of thing, a conflict of interests and beliefs, and people feel the need to defend it.
I would say that's kind of part of the problem, right? Is the fact that it's maybe less overt, but that it means it's still festering below the surface.
Yeah, it's a weird one. You won't see most normal people talking about it, but it's kind of just there. And I'm a Christian. I believe in Christ's rebirth and resurrection, all the stuff normally is part of it. And I celebrate that on Christmas. That's normal. But I don't care if other people celebrate it for different things or something like that. It's whatever, people are people. But it just comes down to a notion that there is an attack against it and must be defended in the culture. It must be a part of it. And when most people still support it, it's just strange to me. So I tried digging into it and trying to figure out what the mentality really comes down to.
Well, I guess my question is how do you define Christmas? Because my assumption is that people who are worried about the war on Christmas are worried more about the Christian side of things, because Christmas, like it or not, has become very commercialized, and there are lots of non-Christian elements to Christmas, of Christmas trees, Santa, reindeer. None of that's in the Bible, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, not only is it not biblical, written in then, it didn't even exist at that time in that culture. But a lot of those traditions actually come from former pagan cultures. A lot of the stuff you talk about, the trees, and a lot of the iconography comes from originally Yule, which we still use the word Yule to refer to Christmas, but originally was a celebration from the Germanic peoples, kind of celebrating relations to the wild hunt and the god Odin and stuff like that.
So that's what Yule is. Okay.
Yeah. So Yule or Yuletide originally comes from the festivals around the winter solstice from the Germanic influences. Yeah.
Because I heard that another influence on Christmas was the Roman holiday of Saturnalia.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I've heard that too. And I think that's a weird one because I think a few traditions came out of that, but there's a lot of crazy things that went on in Saturnalia. I want to get my facts straight because I was trying to look up stuff about Saturnalia right before we started this. I was like, oh wait, shoot, what was involved? Because it's kind of wild.
It's the Romans. It was always wild.
It was great. Yeah, apparently.
But pine trees obviously don't exist. Probably south of Italy, or I don't know. Does Italy have pine trees?
I don't think so. Cyprus had some nice trees, but that's gone.
Like the Romans wouldn't have had pine trees. The Judeans wouldn't have had pine trees. Like, obviously that's like a European thing.
Yeah, and all those things kind of throughout history. And there's a lot of people who talk about the history of Christmas and will say like, oh, like the culture just became more Christian over time and they wanted to make it part of a tradition, or they'll point to the fact that Christianity was a large part of like the Roman Empire and other things, and like, oh, it was like taken over by force and forcibly put in, or things like that. We're talking about like almost 1,000 years of history. Like, it's kind of hard to consolidate everything that was going on into just one like bit of history. There's just so much involved, and like, yeah, a lot of that is true in a lot of ways, but it's like kind of gets conglomerated into quick statements that we try to make. But the history of what's behind it is much bigger than any one religion or culture, and they've all kind of been adapted over time as the world became more, as people just expanded more throughout the world and cultures were adopted and moved to other cultures, and religions changed. Like, most of the religions that celebrated their stuff prior to Christmas on the winter solstice basically went away as the world became more Christian, and a lot of traditions kind of got adopted into it.
Yeah, so how did Christmas get settled on the 25th? Because obviously the solstice is like a couple of days earlier, so I mean you can kind of see, but like, how did the 25th specifically as a day get settled in?
I actually had a really good bit with that from St. Augustine, of all people. St. Augustine was quoted talking about the winter solstice and how he found it fitting, how like, the sun at the solstice is in the day for only so much time, and then it becomes like the days get longer after the solstice, is what often people celebrate. Like, people celebrated the rebirth of a lot of local gods and other things around that time, where the solstice seemed like the death of nature and a rebirth. Whereas like Augustine kind of made a similar comparison to Jesus. There's a couple references to him as like the Son, and not like the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit, but like an association with the sun in like Malachi and places like that, and kind of drawing from that and saying, yeah, this would be a fitting time to have this celebration of his birth, even though that's absolutely not when he was born.
Okay, I like that. I hadn't heard that explanation before, because I know that's kind of like like Easter. You have like a springtime celebration. That's when like the world supposedly comes back from the dead of winter.
Right, and like Easter, is movable, right? It's not the same fixed date every year, unlike Christmas.
Yeah, that one's a bit different. And it actually has a similar thing where currently that time is talked about as the rebirth of Christ. But even Easter, I believe the term does not come from Ishtar. I got that wrong. But there's another pagan deity that the word Easter comes from. That was also a kind of a rebirth kind of holiday of that time.
Bloody pagans.
There's a lot of interesting things about the Christianization of that whole period. But like, we have today holidays where, like Christmas, where where for a long time it's been culturally, it was all about Jesus and Christianity, and now it's about just like nothing, or not nothing. Nothing's not a good word to define secularism, is it really?
I'm okay with secularism being nihilism. That's fine with me.
It's just we just embrace the void for Christmas. How about that? No, but like
material pleasures, acknowledgement that nothing really matters. Yeah, that sounds like modern day Christmas to me.
I mean, a lot of ways, yeah, that's kind of what it becomes. But for a lot of people, you could argue that tends to be the emphasis, is like gift giving, and so a lot of like platitudes that are nice but don't really relate to like any sort of belief system, or just generally just kind of religiously neutral. I guess I could put it that way. Typically, and when people like who throw out a culture war narrative kind of bring out like secularism as like an other kind of thing. When I say other, I mean like a group like that's like out of the group that you're in, as kind of like an opponent. Like, there's people like actively trying to make it less Christian.
Well, I guess my question for these people is what does the ideal world look like? Like, what do they want Christmas to be that it's not? Like, do they just want to get rid of Santa and Christmas trees, and instead you have like a giant nativity scene? Like, are you allowed to have Christmas lights? Like, how do you make Christmas more Christian, or Christian enough for these people?
I think like you could ask a million people that and get a million different questions, because I think people all have their own take on that. And Oh boy, God, let this be the only time I ever cite a PragerU video. But I decided to check them because I had known that they had a video titled, was it Just Say Merry Christmas? Which was, sorry, Just Say Christmas? I don't care. But that was related to a hashtag that was going around on social media of Just Say Merry Christmas, which is similar to like, I guess like kind of like your dad, where some people will say like Merry Christmas in like a aggressive tone, is like I kind of asserting it into a culture, like don't say Happy Holidays, say Merry Christmas. And so kind of like pushing into that. And so I watched that before this just to be like, okay, I want to get this perspective down, just understand it. And maybe I picked the wrong thing because, oh man, they always feel like a straw man of everything ever. They're kind of insane at PragerU. And people are familiar with that, right? Like you guys have
I thought it
heard
was
me.
Prager. I thought it was a hard G. I guess I'm wrong.
Oh, I say Prager. I think actually Prager is correct, but yeah, I've rambled about them before. They're basically just a media group that is not a university, no matter what they try to say, that just makes a bunch of videos effectively kind of giving information from like a very like politically conservative perspective. Usually say that in so many ways, but they very much promote like a narrative of like us versus like liberals and things like that you often see from this kind of perspective. And they're just annoying. And I think everyone's forcibly seen them because they used to make their videos ads on YouTube. That was extremely annoying.
So what you're saying is that if you just put a U at the end of your name, you're not an accredited university.
No,
So
you're not.
My degree from the University of the Nintendo Wii U is completely worthless.
Oh, the Nintendo Wii U itself has become completely worthless.
Hey!
Oh, yeah. So they're just like a media group that makes a whole bunch of videos like that. And they made one about like it's called Just Say Merry Christmas, which is about this whole subject. Basically, oh man, it was kind of fun, just funny to listen to because Dennis Prager, the guy who runs all that, was kind of just going on about him growing up and people would say Christmas and there was nothing wrong with it. And now all these people are saying Happy Holidays and talking about feeling like personally attacked by it. And I was like, dude, really? This seems really exaggerated.
Yeah, like I think for me, like if someone wished me a Happy Hanukkah or I don't know, some other holiday, Happy Kwanzaa, I would not be offended in any way. ...
No, I mean that'd be cool. Like, cool, you celebrate Hanukkah. That's awesome. Cool. Like, think most of the entire world is like that. But then you see people like this where they're promoting this narrative, and it's like it just seems like way out of proportions. But the reason I still bring it up, even though I think it's kind of ridiculous, is there's a quote that they put in there that I think really kind of hits the nail on the head as to how this all happens. Basically, they were kind of going over the narrative of like, oh, people were saying this is a war on Christmas. And it basically said, yes, it is a war on Christmas. And then with this quote, it's a war on the religious nature of America. That's the part right there.
Okay.
So he's conflating this idea that people say Merry or say Happy Holidays now with the idea that religion or Christianity specifically as a whole is under attack.
Yes, that's basically the point there. Is it relates to something deeper than just Christmas or anything. It's coming down to people trying to say other things than Merry Christmas is becoming an attack on Christianity, which is oftentimes in this narrative the core of American morality. That, I think, hit it on the head of like, okay, that explains a lot better oftentimes where this whole thing about the war on Christmas comes from. It's deeper than just anyone's preference on what holiday they're celebrating.
So I guess David kind of asked a question earlier about, like, would some of these people, do away with Santa and go back to just, Jesus in the manger or whatever?
I don't know. I feel like I could absolutely picture somebody doing that, but I don't really know if I have a good example. Funny enough, looking up history of like Christmas traditions and stuff, it seems like Puritan Christians actually prohibited celebrating Christmas because of oftentimes some of the traditions involved in it were seen as too far beyond what they considered morally acceptable. I wouldn't say it was like, not they wouldn't have used a similar term to like now. It's like, oh, it was secular or anything, but basically people out and like drinking and revelry and stuff like that was not acceptable to them.
Right. So, but like, isn't that part of the American narrative as well, that it was founded by the Puritans?
In a lot of ways, I think that this kind of thing comes back to that, because a lot of times the settlers that came to America were like Puritans and Christian groups that had their own conflicts of cultural ideas with other nations, and like Anglicanism and stuff like that in Britain. And they were like, well, you have this colony over here, let's go settle it.
Well, I mean, my only kind of take on it is like the reason I asked, whether or not people would be okay with Santa is because Santa is, this very sort of modern invention, but also the fact that, he exists in different versions in different cultures, and different cultures celebrate Christmas, the idea of Christmas, differently. So like, how can there truly, be a war if like there's nobody really knows like what part you're fighting against?
Yeah, and that's why this whole thing is just kind of loose and doesn't usually get a lot of support unless it fits into people's fears of being replaced by another culture, or having an other that does things that you don't approve of, like the whole like, oh, it's becoming secularized. And like even the PragerU video, though I think they're insane for saying this because nobody's doing this, but they were basically claiming that people were going to take Christmas out of the calendar, and it's like, nope. No, nobody's going to do that. Everybody loves Christmas.
Well, it's like I mean, not to like completely rag on right-wing politicians, but let's go for it.
Let's go for it anyway, just in case.
They'll put, I don't know what these are dog whistles for. Well, I mean, I could probably guess. When they say, I'm running on a platform of family values. I value families. I think families are very important. It's the backbone of America or Canada or whatever. And I'm like, are there candidates running against families? Like, I think that we should not live in families. We should all live in shipping crates.
That's the anti-fam party.
Like,
no, but that's exactly what makes it a dog whistle, right? Is like, I'm running on families. I'm going to leave out the adjectives of those families, nuclear, white, etc.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, or probably more frequently for that specific context, heterosexual.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. Well, like, or they'll say like family values. So I'm like, well, what is a family value? Like, are you going back to our other episode where we talked about like censorship of like, there's certain things like alcohol, drugs that are not considered like family values. So if you're campaigning on a platform of family values, are you restricting people's access to those things?
Yeah, that's a whole big one. But it does kind of pull into all this because, like, I talk about the war on Christmas because it's seasonal and we're coming into Christmas time. But all this, I think, is just a microcosm of a larger thing that's often defined as the culture war as a whole.
Yeah, which I think, like, going back to what you were saying of like, people are worried about having their culture erased or replaced. I'm like, oh, geez, sure would be a shame if if the European colonists kind of finally got their just desserts after 500 years of imposing Christianity on everyone else. Which,
you think someone would do that? Just come in here and just replace the culture?
What? No, there's no historical precedence for that whatsoever.
Gosh, why would anyone do that? But like today, like the whole like culture war narrative, like there's various types of culture wars, quote unquote, that have happened throughout the years, and kind of the term we use now kind of came from. This is not directly relevant, but Kulturkampf from German. I probably seriously butchered that pronunciation. But a similar thing to not quite the same struggle that was going on with the Puritans and the Anglican Church, but the Protestant and Catholic churches back in like the 1870s had like their own feud of like who was going to control education in Germany. Because and there were different values that the different sects of Christianity had, and there was obviously influence in their government for who controls education and stuff like that, and there was a lot of conflict there, and that's not like exactly what we're dealing with here, but it's kind of where the term comes from, so I thought that was kind of neat. What
did they decide on?
The Kulturkampf is a very specific period in history. I'm going to guess it just settled on the Romans, but
well, it's also like the birthplace of Protestantism, though. So, but I do know like there's like still like a strong Catholic following in Germany, or
oh man, no, it just turned out to the lame possible ending, which is just a whole bunch of peace laws that were kind of just made as like compromises between groups throughout various years in the 1880s.
Politics.
Yeah, it just turned into politics.
Well, in In Canada, they kind of did it very strangely, or like perhaps if we were to re-examine the Canadian Constitution, we wouldn't have done it like this. Where enshrined in Canada's Constitution is the idea that you have to have a Catholic school system and a Protestant school system.
Really?
And what has happened is that the Protestant system eventually just became the secular, regular public school system. But alongside that, you also have government-funded Catholic schools.
See, I can see that as a compromise coming out of like two different cultural ideals over time. And like, okay, well, we'll compromise by having it where we just have both. And then that changes because cultures change over time. Like that eventually changes and doesn't match the letter of the law anymore.
Well, I mean, America is built on freedom of religion, but they only felt safe in doing that because you had a dominant religion at the time.
Freedom of religion. Which one? The one.
Which one? The one.
The one that's left.
Yeah, and with America being mostly English settlers compared to Canada, which kind of had to make concessions between the English and the French. Okay, well, we're going to have a school system for you filthy French Catholics, and we're also going to have another school system for us enlightened English Protestants, and everything will be great.
The Virgin Catholics versus the Chad Protestants. That's how we're doing this.
Whereas now, I think like you have to see the value, whether or not you are religious or not religious, in separating church and state. Like you can't. I genuinely would like to talk to someone who thinks that, I would love a theocratic government. What could go wrong?
Well, now that you mention that, great segue. But like we've come into more recent times today where people are talking about a culture war existing in America, which is seemingly between conservative Christianity and what would often be defined as progressivism or secularism as a whole. And not just on like the subject of Christmas, but various topics that still today we're still debating in politics, like marriage for homosexual people. Probably a better way for me to word that. But like between like gay marriage and like abortion or education in schools, like all these subjects are still things that people debate strongly in politics today. But I'm talking about stuff that was studied and written about as in like 1991, which is like 29 years ago now. I was just briefly reading over a book written in 1991, Culture Wars, The Struggle to Define America by James Davison Hunter, who was kind of trying to identify this movement as he saw it and figure out what was going on and seeing like all these different political issues and how like lines were being divided, not just how policy lines were being divided by cultural groups, basically. But like I was reading about it, and it was like all the things they were talking about, and it was stuff that like people are still like debating. Is like, what are we talking about here? We're talking about like the right to marriage. Like this was around the time when like Proposition S was being discussed in San Francisco. They were trying to have a legal representation for civil unions, quite literally just for people who were in like gay relationships, but it wouldn't have been something that was traditionally considered marriage by Christian standards. And so they were trying to get that pushed, and then people were protesting it with Proposition S, trying to say, no, this is all just, they're trying to redefine marriage and stuff like that. You hear people talk about that today, or at least I do. Does it sound like you guys do too?
I mean, less so since I live in a pretty liberal area, but yeah.
It's worth mentioning I'm kind of in like the heart of evangelical Christian culture by where I live.
I guess like the confusing, well, I mean, I think part of this is I'm wondering, so published in 1991, I wonder how much of this is like fallout from the Cold War, because there's this huge push to make America more religious as a way of preventing the spread of communism, because communism had decided that, obviously, if you want everyone to be equal, we can't have religion, which, okay.
Yeah, I think they went about that in rather ludicrous ways, in my opinion.
I mean, ironic considering Russia's track on, human rights and LGBTQ rights.
Yeah, they've been pretty awful with that. Been like up to like the fall of the Berlin Wall and other things that were much closer to that time. Like throughout all that going on in the rest of the Western world and America, I think during that whole time, although absolutely there were plenty of things to criticize about communism, I think we saw it completely fail. It often was and often still is used as a red herring to it today of like, oh, if such and such happens, then communism will happen and stuff like that.
Red herring, pun intended.
Red herring. No, actually, I was pulling that terminology off of the old movie Clue, because they kept calling, there was like, as they were talking about like communists and stuff and that, they kept saying, oh, no, communism is just a red herring for this whole plan I had and stuff like that. It's a good movie. It's a good movie.
Well, because, yeah, like during the Cold War, I think they added In God We Trust, the American money.
Oh, that was that, wasn't it?
Okay.
To show that, oh, we're not those godless communists. We believe in the God of democracy and the free market and not redistributing wealth from the rich to the poor. Well, hang on.
Whoa. Trickle down economics. Thank you.
It totally works every single time. But no, that was when In God We Trust came about. The term was adopted in 1957, e pluribus, supplanting e pluribus unum as the previous official motto of the United States. So yeah, around that time, it's been going around and has been put on. Oh, first appeared on the 2-cent piece in 1864. That's actually way earlier.
Oh, wow.
I think that went out for a while. Oh no, wait, hold on. But then was started to put on our paper currency since 1957. So yeah, so that whole movement became part of that. And like, I think recently there were some suggestions that people said like, hey, why is this on our coins? We don't need it on there. We could redo like our iconography and stuff. And I think a part of this culture was oftentimes people brought up and was like, no, we can't do that. That's a part of America. That's part of who we are. It's always been there. It has not always been there. Yeah, that's a smaller piece of this that kind of falls by the wayside, but like I've seen it before. Anytime someone brings up taking that off, it's kind of seen as like an attack on like American values or an attack on Christianity to like,
yeah, or like you take the Pledge of Allegiance, right? One nation under God and all that,
that's a much bigger version of that, because I mean, how long has the Pledge of Allegiance been actually said in schools? Was that around the same time?
At least like 30 years. I could not tell you.
See, this is all really good stuff. Maybe I'm going a little too far trying to find exact years for stuff, but like we all know it's all like in every single school, it's like required for people to get up and stand in front of a flag and say, I pledge allegiance to the flag, yada, 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 one nation under God, indivisible, with union and justice for all.
Well, much like the currency, it didn't used to say under God, right?
I got different versions here. Ooh. The first version, I pledge allegiance to my flag and the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. That was 1892.
There you go.
It's like that. Wait, when did under God come into it? Hang on a second. Oh, that was 1954.
Mm-hmm.
That was not added until like 70 years ago.
Peak McCarthyism.
Yeah, no, exactly.
Oh man, but like this is the kind of thing like we're seeing is like this kind of narrative that this stuff is integral, like stuff like that is integral to American culture, and it's barely as old as like the oldest living generations in America.
Well, yeah, what really gets me is that Canada does not have an equivalent to the Pledge of Allegiance. Like it's super creepy to see like videos of kids. I pledge allegiance to the flag. I don't like what are you?
I don't like the concept in general of requiring children to stand up and then give allegiance to a nation by obligation. I am not a fan of that concept.
Well, like in general, like do you ever do the Pledge of Allegiance anywhere else? Like so probably for your if you get sworn in as a citizen, would you do the Pledge of Allegiance?
You have to do something. You have to take a different pledge.
Yeah, like there's a Canadian oath where you have to like swear allegiance to the Queen of England, because apparently we're not our own country.
Who is one to talk now?
Oh, good heavens, we're still in the Commonwealth.
Hey, I was born a naturally born Canadian citizen. I didn't have to do that.
So
you know what, Liz? I don't much care for you or your family.
That's a fun subject to get into. Ooh, family.
But yeah, like so you just do this in school when you're a kid, but also similar to the national anthem. So like in Canada, we had to sing "O Canada" every day. My parents tell me that they used to sing "God Save the Queen," and I'm like, I really don't care what God does with the Queen. Maybe it's sports games, but like what determines?
Well, and that's its own different thing, right? Yeah, you see, you got the Pledge of Allegiance. You have the national anthem. Wait, so the national anthem is what gets sung at ball games?
Yeah, I think that often gets related to a lot of military involvement in like funding on those things, but don't quote me. I only remember hearing that in passing. I probably got it from a Reddit comment, so I'm probably not a good source.
Well, and like I don't know all the words to "Oh Canada." Is the military involved in that one at all?
It's kind of the have a military? Nah, it's kidding you guys.
Excuse me. Yes, we have a military. We ask God to keep our land glorious and free.
Word.
Well, I guess there's a line, we stand on guard for thee. So like everyone is supposed to guard Canada.
Oh, okay.
Not really a mention of the military.
It's close enough. Like every national anthem has some air of nationalistic pride in it. Like that's kind of
I guess
the genre.
That's the thing of like, where do you draw the line between nationalism and patriotism? I think it's very arbitrary.
It is, and oftentimes those kinds of sentiments get pulled into this culture war narrative of like whenever there's a culture war narrative, there's always a creation of an enemy that I've noticed is like in this example, it's like secularism or liberal idea or liberals or something like that, or they always try to paint it as people with values other than yours that are trying to vie for control, and that's I think the part that makes this concerning to me is because you can really get people into this mentality by convincing them that people other than you are trying to take away something you value.
Yeah, I mean, that was all part of the Cold War of let's convince the Christians that the communists in Russia want to get rid of their religion. Meanwhile, I don't think that was their main goal. I'm sure they wanted to just take over the world. I think that was probably what they were up to, not necessarily getting rid of Christianity.
They were trying, but they were having a real hard go of it in their own place.
Yeah, like, I mean, you can unfortunately manipulate people with things that tug at their heartstrings of like, oh, well, these values are really important to me. These traditions are really important to me. I really like Christmas. Therefore, if we don't support the war in Vietnam or the war in Korea, well, who knows what'll happen? We probably will lose Christmas.
Yeah, and again, I was seeing people talk about like acting like it was out in like Europe. They were trying to like do this too, and I'm like, Europe is full of like probably even longer history. Well, definitely a longer history of Christian culture where people celebrate Christmas all the time. It's like this is not. I don't think that's an issue over there at all. I think they're probably okay.
Well, yeah, like Christmas is not going to go anywhere. I mean, it was part of the dominant religion for about 2,000 years. And I think there's so many people that celebrate Christmas secularly. Just it's such an ingrained part of Western culture that I would be astounded if we're not celebrating Christmas in the year 3000.
Yeah, it will be, and it will continue to be. But I think we'll probably continue to see more cultural changes. I would not be surprised if it just a lot of our expressions of it just become more and more consumerist, because I mean that's kind of the trend we're seeing right now. And I'm not like saying like, oh no, things are going to go away and just become all capitalism or whatever. Maybe, but it's an interesting thing that in this case, oftentimes like. Big companies are also seen as an enemy in this whole war on Christmas thing. Do you remember Starbucks and the red cups?
Yes, I don't get that. Like,
oh man, I was digging up a bit of stuff and found an old Vox article kind of going into the explanation, and you can kind of follow a trend. Like they have like a great like timeline of Starbucks cups. Since like 2009, kind of showing what they looked like. And can you tell me, can you spot like Jesus Christ on any of those for me real quick? Just like show me where you see him in that.
Is Jesus not a mermaid?
Jesus, what? Oh no,
that's not him. Oh no.
Oh no!
Oh man, I've been drinking.
Well, I mean, of course, you know the sheer irony of it all is that who wouldn't get presents on Christmas? Jesus, he was Jewish.
Yeah, exactly. But like something like this ridiculous thing is like people got up in arms in 2015 over Starbucks announcing that their cup was just going to be a solid red. And I do recall people, not just like, you know, crazy pundits, but like, I mean, like Facebook friends and stuff like that complaining about it being like, oh, this is becoming too secular. And it's like the year before that was like a shadow of trees and snowflakes. And before that, it was just like hexagonal snowflakes, and then like Frosty the Snowman or like polar bears on sleds. It's like this entire thing, this is all like quote unquote secular, but like people were acting like, oh, creating a red cup, it means that they're somehow like trying to take the Christ out of Christmas. And I'm like, what?
Well, because red is the color of Satan, and if you rearrange the letters in Satan, you get Santa.
Dun, dun, dun,
dun. Oh my gosh.
No, but I mean, yeah, that's the broad irony of it all, right? Is like that, corporations are definitely the one perpetuating this idea of Christmas. I mean, sure, maybe it's a little different than your super uber religious Christmas, but at the end of the day, like if anybody is going to keep this broad tradition of Christmas alive, it's big corporations.
Yeah, it kind of is, and like this kind of thing is just not a big deal. And we live in a multicultural society, and if these companies are going to try and appeal to the masses of people in a way that's just presumably inoffensive, is what they always try to be, even if they try and, like, as we've seen a lot of companies trying to stand for various values throughout this year, it's usually whatever gets the least flack to whatever target audience they're going with. And so it's like, just why is this a thing?
Yeah, well, I think part of it also, you got to blame the 24-hour news cycle of, geez, we're all out of news stories. Everything's actually not too bad in the world. How about there's a war on Christmas? Great. People love Christmas. They hate war. This is going to be, we're going to sell so many newspapers, so many commercials on TV. Like,
yeah, and I think the transformation of news media over the years kind of plays into that, because it's not even a recent thing, but like so much of like news is about instilling fear in people. Like, why do they talk about car accidents that happen so far away from you that are tragic? It's like they want you to be paying attention and listening.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, like if you look at trends of like, ignoring 2020.
This here's an outlier. Just start over.
Yeah. The trends are that crime is going down. People are living longer. People are living healthier lives. Like, things are getting better for the most part. But obviously, you don't have news stories about everything is fine. Carry on with your day. Don't even watch the news today. We've got nothing to tell you. Instead, it's, there was a little thing in the Middle East. Oh, maybe there was an explosion. Maybe they're a terrorist. Who knows? Oh, those North Koreans, they're up to something crazy.
Yeah, it's like it always is something new. And like just saying everything's fine or things are improving is not exciting to anyone.
No, exactly.
Not at all. And I think it's worth pointing out like legitimate problems in like culture and society. But then when you get just ridiculous distractions like this, it's like, it seems like a straw man argument of like people complaining like, oh, there's a war on Christmas. It's like I don't think anybody actually cares. But there are people who keep perpetuating this idea. And that's why it's like, why does this continue to be said and exclaimed when
it becomes a tangible representation of this, like outrage and discomfort that you feel. Like, when you mentioned Starbucks, I immediately thought of, I think it was like 2 or 3 years ago, where they had somebody holding hands, and then somebody was like, both of those hands are women. Starbucks is supporting the gay agenda, yada, yada.
Oh, that is a huge thing too. And like that kind of goes back to this thing as a whole, is like a lot of opposition to even having anything that represents like homosexual relationships in like government comes from kind of the same vein as all this, in this like culture war kind of mentality.
Mm-hmm.
Of, it seems like when people hold this mentality that their culture, that their government must support their moral values in order to be valid or even like acceptable. And yeah, I just think that takes it too far.
Well, that's the thing. I think people in general probably need to evaluate what is appropriate for the government to intervene on and what is not. And to think about, what if the tables were turned? Would you want, and let's say, I don't know, like the Pastafarians, the Pastafarian party takes over. Would you want them imposing spaghetti Christmas on you? Probably not. So, yeah.
I wouldn't want somebody imposing spaghetti Christmas, although frankly, I do like to have like pasta or something.
That sounds delicious.
Easy. Like, so if I have been celebrating a Pastafarian tradition on Christmas this whole time, you know what? I don't care. Put a bowl on my head. But even then, like if your goal is to promote religious freedom, like when you see somebody like in the group like that, even though frankly I'm pretty sure they're all just a bunch of trolls just trying to troll out like religious freedom people. They're like, oh well, if you're saying like this is how you want to live, then we're going to try and do this, and because of your logic, you have to like allow this. And so you get guys with like bowls on their heads in like their like license, like the driver's license. I'm like, okay, sure, that's fine. Just it's fine.
Yeah,
I don't care.
What I mean, you also have the complete opposite of that. So in Quebec, I think it's still policy. You can't have any religious symbols if you are to receive or provide government services. No crosses, no hijabs, no yarmulkes, none of that.
So that's only for photographs, right?
No, like if you are receiving a service, you can't have a hijab on. You can't have like a cross necklace.
So if you're like unemployed and like you're on like some whatever equivalent to food stamps you have, like you can't be wearing that to receive the benefits?
Yep.
Dude.
I don't know like what level that's enforced, but that's the law. No religion.
Well, I mean, you see that in other countries too, and that almost kind of, I don't know, it's weird because it does feed into this narrative that religions are under attack, but at the same time, when it happens to minority religions, like nobody really bats an eye. And I'm not saying, Islam is a minority religion in this case, but when you take the burqa ban in France, for instance, you have these really uncomfortable instances of people being made to essentially disrobe in public, which is insane. But because it's, this weird intersection of both gender and religion, people don't really know how to feel about it.
Yeah, and I've got like level-headed friends who will talk about that and say it's like obviously not okay, but it doesn't become a part of this discussion when people are talking about like a culture war, like in like freedom of religion and stuff like that. Is I rarely hear about that stuff. It's usually just Christianity, and I think they're still arguably the majority religion in America, so I understand that's often what's talked about, but I feel like that should be, if the true statement is that you care about religious freedom, that kind of stuff should also be concerning and part of the conversation. But I often don't see it.
Yeah, well, I think part of the problem is they don't. People who are fighting, who are on the side of believing that there is a war on Christmas, are not interested in religious freedom. They just want to be able to do their own religion thing. Yeah,
and then you get kind of more concerning versions of that, like a war may not be the right term for it, but kind of there's oftentimes a debate over teaching evolution versus creationism in schools. Like I feel like that's very much in the same vein, because like maybe it's less of a problem, like Aiden, I assume there's not many places out by you, but like, and really not by me either. If you go deeper south, there are school districts that are like fighting like, no, we have to support both. We have to talk about creationism in science classes and stuff like that. And I don't see how it's not creationism is not discussed as a part of science. And if you're teaching a science class, shouldn't it be about what is being taught? Well, what is generally accepted by scientists and how to do science and how to determine this stuff and what's been done in the past? Like, right, like to talking about evolution.
Like, surely if you are someone who believes in creationism, you are also attending once a week at least some sort of religious institution that will reinforce your values and your beliefs. So why do you also need school to double down on what you're already going to church for? Or like, is church not enough? Do you need to go to two sessions of church per week? Like, or like, are your teachings on creationism so weak that a simple science class will undo everything you've taught?
Right. I think it is definitely the latter, is, the acknowledgement that, even if you were exposed to this tiny modicum of real scientific information, that, your entire religious world will be upended.
I think, unfortunately, that is a lot of it, because I don't agree with the typical creationist narrative that people have, where it's like, oh, God created the earth 6,000 years ago and everything was like kind of built from the ground up and no evolution didn't happen and stuff like that. I don't even see that in the Bible. Like, I know I might not be normal in that, but I'm like, in terms of like Genesis 1, like it looks more to me like it's written in a way that's explaining who God is as creator of the universe, not exactly how he did it.
Well, I think that's part of the problem is that people take the Bible translation that they read very literally, and like even to the point of like not knowing the original Greek or Hebrew version of like, well, here are the other connotations of this. Yeah, well, I mean, I think in general, people who are in more extremist religious communities are taught not to question their beliefs, just to accept them.
Yeah, and that I strongly disagree with that notion. But then you get when you teach that way, and like frankly, I've looked into like I used to be more of a creationist person, and I can't make it work with evolution and looking at how like history seems to go and how we've studied it. I think evolution makes a lot more sense as to how things had been formed. I just think that trying to present creationism as how God created the world exactly as written, I don't think it holds up. And I think that people who believe it that way, as they've been taught, and are trying to undermine creationism in science classes when the scientific community doesn't acknowledge it. And be able to say something that helps and helps figure it out, like that's a good thing. Unfortunately, looking at statistics, like abstinence-only sex education really has not worked to help avoid things like teenage pregnancy and other things.
Have they tried just saying no? I hear that's a pretty good strategy for everything.
Have you tried just not having sex as hard as that? but then, like, clearly that's insufficient. And, like, honestly, that comes into it. Like, sex education is another thing that's oftentimes seen as a thing in this because it seems like a lot of people don't want the concept of actually teaching anything other than save it until marriage. But
like also you should still know how it works. So I feel like
absolutely. And not to sink my own ship, I don't think I got a very good sex education as in relation to that, and I think that can set someone back very easily. I'd rather that not be the case. I'd rather people be honest and understand the subject because it's important.
Well, and a whole part of it is like this absolutism, right? Like it's, the fact that they're saying, no sex at all, none whatsoever. And, like if they just looked at the data and saw that like, a proper sex education would greatly mitigate the things that they claim to be against, like, teenage pregnancy or whatever. Like nobody is saying that teenage pregnancy is a good idea. Nobody thinks that,
excuse me, Aiden, our Jesus Christ came from a teen pregnancy. So are you saying that you hate Jesus because he wants sex ed?
Hold on. How old was Mary Magdalene?
Why
wasn't she in school?
Mary Magdalene wasn't his mom.
Or sorry. Mary,
that's heretical.
The other Mary.
Yeah. I've heard 15, which is pretty young.
Okay.
Although, frankly, a totally different culture, a lot of things, and frankly, they weren't getting married at that time yet. Anyway, there was betrothal process and a whole. I don't know. You could try and explain it all of a million and one ways, but different times.
Yeah. Well, it was different times. Like if the maximum life expectancy is 60. And that's if you survive childbirth.
Yeah.
Like what's stopping you?
People had no choice but to mature faster then. But that's obviously a whole different culture than now.
Well, that too. Of like, you cannot deny that men and women are more equal today than they were 2,000 years ago.
Oh, absolutely. We've made
it's just a different culture. Obviously, my statement was in jest.
Yes, you're joking. We're joking.
I forgot how old she was.
Yeah, so you kind of bring it up, and you're like, oh dear, wow,
yeah.
Yikes!
Good God, no, bad God, knocking up a teenage girl, not cool, man.
But all these, I don't know, all these subjects get wrapped up into this big like issue of culture, and like it's kind of hard to see eye to eye on things. Like you could probably, if it wasn't so like built into this like us versus them like narrative, I think people would be able to come much more eye to eye on things that are more practical, like we were just talking about. And yet, but then it comes down to like these people are attacking your way of life and stuff like that. And like, I just don't think any of that mentality is helpful to anyone.
Well, yeah, like in general, I mean, we live in the misinformation era, so you are not inclined to learn why do people think the way that they think. But I mean, people manage to prey on our tribalistic instincts of we've got my side and your side. Look at sports teams of like, oh, well, I support the people that are, well, I guess they're not from this part of the country, but they work for someone. Well, I guess he's not really from this part of the country either, but they have a stadium in this part of the country that I live in.
I support the steep people that my state bought to come here.
Right, like it's so arbitrary, or like it might even be I like the color that this team is. Like it's
Let's
so
go Washington football team.
so random. But like, ooh, I hate the rivals of these people. Ooh, they're no good because of the same reasons. Only they live in a different part of the country. Like,
yeah, the generally like tribalistic mentalities are often played on in this, and just the basic survival of trying to support you and yours. And that, I don't think that needs to exist anymore, but it's such a thing in people's minds of like, I'm in the right, my people need to survive, and this is how we're going to do it. And I think when that comes down to being detrimental to other people who live life differently, I think you have a lot of problems in that. And oftentimes this comes into that because there's oftentimes trying to block people from living different ways.
Right. I mean, and you think that like sports would be kind of like a healthy version of that, right? Like, yeah, it's, tribalistic. We hate those people, but like it's in jest, right? You don't actually hate those people.
It's all for fun.
Yeah, but then you all get to A, sports fans are completely insane. I will die on that hill. And B, like in modern times when you see how these things have become intertwined with, say, kneeling during the national anthem or waiting.
Yeah, I was going to try to segue to that too. Yeah.
Oh
yeah.
Man, people still are upset about that I talk to. Like, people act like it's like this affront to what Colin Kaepernick or other people did, where they just knelt during the national anthem. It's like, how could you not do that? It's like, he has the right to do that. Like, he's expressing
free speech.
himself in some way. It's free speech.
Mm-hmm.
It really is.
It's literally free speech.
It's and like, I don't know, people who say they want free speech and for various reasons then get upset at that. It just I think it kind of undermines. It's clear that it's like freedom for me, but not for thee, to use a cliche.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like I feel like I could sit down during the national anthem. I feel like I could give the middle finger to the American flag, the Canadian flag. I don't care. I can do whatever I want. You can't repress my freedom of expression like that.
Yeah, no, that's ridiculous. It's entirely ridiculous. And I think recently, I don't remember which team it was because they all look the same to me, but like one recently had some like statement about, I think it was related to the recent like Black Lives Matter movement and stuff like that. Like a big team put out some big statement of belief or something. And I remember a lot of people not complaining about the message specifically, but complaining that they were making a political statement and just be like, I wish they would just, it shouldn't be political. It's just sports. We're just watching it for a good time. And like, I think those people probably do just want to see it as escapism. It's not my preferred escapism, but for some people, just sitting down and watching the game is kind of what you do to take your mind off of things. But I don't know. I feel like if it generally is like, why is it that statement that was too far when there's other statements made? I feel like there's something else there that people aren't honest with themselves about, at least. Maybe I'm too nice.
Yeah, well, I think first of all, we have to remember that sports players, actors, these are all real people. They're allowed to have their opinions. They should also, suffer consequences for their opinions. Hey, if you say something that really offends a lot of your fans, I think a studio is within its rights to not renew your contract if it wants to.
Yeah, they're allowed to do that.
Yeah,
I know. I was thinking about like when you were saying you could flip off the American flag during the national anthem, whatever. I mean, like, yeah, you're totally within your rights. But if a stadium decides that you are too much of a liability, if you keep on doing that, they can kick you out, and that would be okay too.
Mm-hmm.
It's private property; they can do that. That's fine. But I think, in coming up with the last election, I feel like the culture war kind of thing came up a lot. Like, it still just boggles my mind that we've gotten to a point where there was literally a Catholic on the election, Joe Biden. He's been a Catholic his entire life, and every Christian person that I talk to was supporting Donald Trump and saying that like Biden would not be supportive of anything Christian, and like, but Trump would. And it's like, Trump has never ever been somebody who has like supported like Christian values with his life.
Well, excuse me, JJ, do you not remember when they were at the height of the Black Lives Matter protests and he went to church?
Oh,
do you remember?
God.
He went to church. There's photo evidence of him at church.
Yeah, he was holding up a Bible. I think it was upside down, and this was just after he used a bunch of tear gas to clear out protesters, but he went to that church.
Not only that, but he used those same federal agents to remove the pastor from his own building.
You don't need a pastor to go to church, obviously.
Yeah, I don't want to see the government take one out of their church. And that's the thing. Like, I have like, friends who are like pastors and stuff like that, and they act like this like secular culture is going to like remove their right to lead their congregation as they choose, or like force them to do gay marriages or something. And they just voted for a president who like literally ousted a priest from his church for a photo shoot. And I'm like, oh my gosh,
he wouldn't do that to my church.
Oh, it's okay. I saw him on live TV cite 2 Corinthians.
Oh yeah, that's right. He did that way.
Remember the 2 Corinthians that he sent to Liberty University because he did a Google search for a verse that said liberty in it. Oh my gosh.
So it seems like, for the most part, we are fairly united in our opinion on the culture war, or perhaps the fact that it's all made up.
Yeah, I could argue all day with problems I have, and I really hope I didn't turn this into JJ complaining about his friends on Facebook without actually talking to them.
That's fine. And I would maybe disagree with your statement that it's made up. I'm not saying. I mean, it is, somebody made it up, definitely. But the idea, again, I was trying to make earlier is that these things become tangible representations of this resentment that people feel, and that's what makes it real. Like going back to the Starbucks thing. Like, you might hate gay people, but you don't feel like you can say that out loud. But when Starbucks has, makes a cup of two women holding hands, you can say, Starbucks is against family values. And that's like, this nice package.
I'm only going to drink coffee from Chick-fil-A.
Right, exactly.
You joke about that, but like Chick-fil-A, I think a lot of people, like, they're always packed here. I think some people go to them just to support them. Actually, that was a thing not too long ago. 2013, there was some controversy that came out about Chick-fil-A, and it was either their owners or someone in the family said some things that were very controversial about like homosexual rights and stuff like that.
Or they like donated to a anti-LGBTQ organization or something. Yeah,
they've donated to various organizations. Some of them were allegedly like Christian organizations, but they had some rules that I think were just outlandish. Like people in it like must be like nobody who worked for them could be gay and stuff like that. And I'm like, that's too far. And like, but then I had there was like a counter movement of people who would go there just to support them in like for a while. And I was like, yeah, that's kind of how this turns into, and it does become something tangible because that's how people respond. So yeah, I started off being like, hey, there is no like war on Christmas, and I still feel like the vast majority of people, if you talk to them, is like, hey, yeah, just say whatever you want and support whatever holiday you support. But then there are tangible versions of this that come out, which is why I wanted to talk about it, because I think that this becomes a major conflict where people get blinded to like solutions for real issues just because of an us versus them mentality, and that is a problem.
Yeah, what you can also see that it's the people in power that really, like, it benefits them for people to believe that there is this war that, Christianity could be destroyed at any second if we don't go to Chick-fil-A. Or if we don't go to Papa John's Pizza and support the neo-Nazi movement. Who knows what will happen with those liberals? What will they do next?
How many people did you see saying, like, if you vote for Biden, the communists win?
Right.
Or maybe socialists or whatever.
Yeah,
but like,
socialist is the boogeyman here.
That's like, it's kind of insane. And sure, there are like, that doesn't represent like Biden at all. He's like a very neutral person.
Moderate.
Like, it's like, but like people are like painting him as like some kind of like socialist like plant or something. I'm like, are you guys insane? This is just nonsense, and it's all just distractions. And so I think that was often used to try and promote more for the Donald Trump campaign to try and scare people into thinking what would happen if you don't vote for him. Like, sure, maybe he's done like things you don't like. Like, I don't like the guy, but like but look at how bad things would be if you didn't vote for him. And it's like this, now you got people straight up ignoring like what seemed like attempted coups, or like there are people who just been like General Flynn just got pardoned and is now calling for
martial law.
Yeah, calling for martial law. And he's using, like, I read a bit of the statement that he was making that was trying to appeal to like Tea Party folks. And a lot of the wording he was using was very much in this kind of culture war mentality of like, of how it was going to like defend like American values and stuff like that by taking martial law. And I'm like, how is martial law an American value? This is insane. This is the kind of thing I'm worried about. Because if you're so ingrained in this that you think that you have to be on this side because the other side is so terrible, that then you see something like that. And I haven't seen, there are very few people on the right like saying, yo, this is a real problem. And that's why I wanted to talk about this, honestly. That's why I used the Christmas thing. Sorry, guys, you got your baited.
But yeah, like in the interest of like looking at both sides, there's a technique in arguing I've learned recently called the steel man argument. Have you guys heard of this?
I guess it's the opposite of the straw man.
Right. So you're going to build the best version of your opposing side's argument and then take that down. Because anyone can take down a straw man, and only a good argument will take down a steel man. So what is the best argument for there is a war on Christmas, we need to be concerned?
I hate to be the one to build that, but I guess the best argument, I guess, is that like as times change, cultures change, and eventually, I guess you could argue that eventually what you believe in could go away if it's not defended. I don't agree that, but I think that might be the strongest version that I can come up with.
I mean, I think my strongest version of the argument is that, you know, yeah, people are actually looking for changes in your Christmas tradition, right? Like, you know, Santa can be black. Sorry, Megyn Kelly.
Yeah, right. Bring out Medea.
Yeah, right. Like Zwarte Piet, the little Black Peter helper in Netherlands and Dutch and German countries. Like, sorry, that's pretty racist. Probably get rid of that. Like, you know, people are asking for these changes, and these changes are happening. So, you know, yes.
Well, and that's the thing too. Like, values change in society. Like, I think Christmas used to be like much more alcohol focused back in the Middle Ages.
Oh, that sounds so great.
Like you just get completely drunk, and I think that's like this could be completely made up. So apologies. I'm not even the expert today. But like we wish you a Merry Christmas. Come bring us a figgy pudding. Like I think those are supposed to be like drunk people like demanding food.
Oh yeah, I was reading something like that. Yeah,
dude. Imagine if that was like what would actually happen. Like you just ask for some figgy pudding and they just hand you like whatever scotch they got left.
But yeah, like I think for me, like you could definitely make the argument that like big business and companies are eroding the values of Christmas, or like the thing that makes Christmas special. So it's, I mean, how many Christmas episodes have we seen where it's like, oh, it's not about the presents you have, it's about the friends and family you have.
Oh, that feels like a Hallmark commercial.
Right, but like as sold by a big company that wants to manipulate your feelings so that you will punch out another suburban mom on Black Friday, or so that you will buy out more of those inflatable Minion lawn ornaments.
My kid needs a PS5, and darn all you millennial adults who got one, don't you have any kids? Come on, this isn't for you.
Like people are looking to make a quick buck off of this, or they're trying to use Christmas. I mean, Donald Trump himself said that he saved Christmas.
Oh,
he's on the record of saying that. Oh, I was so worried too.
War's over. We did it.
Yeah, but like, obviously this is to score free political points, not to actually espouse the values of generosity or goodwill towards all mankind. Like, I think that is something to be worried about. Maybe not necessarily that you can't put up a nativity scene.
Yeah, it's taken way out of proportions.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And if you want to like, you know, complain about how like big corporations are devaluing it, like fine, sure. If you But like at some point, people are just going to celebrate whatever they want at this time of year. Like,
and I mean, you're absolutely that's it. That's what it is.
let people celebrate what they want.
If you made it, all right, we hereby declare that the governments of US and Canada must put up a nativity scene in every municipality. This is now law. How many people do you think are going to be like, oh, wow, I see a donkey and some shepherds? All right, you convinced me. I now believe in Jesus.
I'm so glad we have these government-funded statues.
Right. Like, what are you talking about? How would that possibly make a difference? Either people are going to believe in it or they're not. Like, sure, like put up a nativity scene on your private property. Put it up in your church, in front of your church. Like, do whatever. On government land, you have to pick something, if you live in a democracy, that supports the people. And if the people, I mean, even if the people vote for putting up a religious scene, that might not be a great idea, because I guarantee an entire town is not going to be all the same religion.
I personally don't want the government saying what religion is correct. I don't think that's any of their business.
Well, exactly, because it's just going to change in a couple years, and then they'll be like, oh, well, guess what? We got a new official religion. Get your pasta strainers. We're all going for Italian food.
Ultimately, it's like people are going to celebrate whatever they believe in this and during this season, and I think that's a good thing. Let people celebrate what they want. Shoot, let's take every single day in December off that people celebrate. I'd be down for that.
More days off.
Yes, please, let's have more days off. I'll make up religious holidays just to get days off.
More days off sounds a little socialist to me, and as we all know, socialists, very anti-Christian. Can't allow it.
Yeah, absolutely. We can't allow that. But it's like, just, I don't think that this needs to be taken to the lengths it goes to, but I think it's good to be aware of kind of what that all ties into. And I don't know. I feel like I see people kind of going at this kind of mentality. I want to be more honest with them and kind of be honest and upfront when it makes sense to. I don't want to start every Facebook argument under the sun. But I think there are generally good people who get kind of swept up in these mentalities out of, like what we talked about, like fear of attack or being replaced or things like that. And like, it's better to dispel those fears and help people to think rationally about issues that actually affect people.
Yeah, I mean, if only we're so easy.
If only it were. I know I'm making that sound very easy and grandiose. Like, oh, what if we just talk and get along? It's like, I'd like to try. I think we should at least try. But
why don't we all get along? No.
Well, look at this mess we're in. But yeah, hey, Christmas coming up. Enjoy it. Say whatever you want. I don't care. Just be nice. And yeah, people are generally good. Just, it's fine.
Amen.
All right, how about this for a compromise? What if he just said, Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays?
How about don't be a Grinch?
Yeah, don't be a Grinch.
I like don't be a Grinch.
Don't be a Grinch. There you go.
Cool.
Bah humbug, everybody. Love y'all. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe.
Happy Kwanzaa.
Happy Kwanzaa. For Overnight Experts, this was JJ with
Aiden
and David. Hey, thanks for listening. Be sure to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to stay up to date on the show, and leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you're listening to this so that we can continue to grow our audience. If you like what we do, consider supporting us on Patreon. Thanks for your support, and we'll see you next time.